Hello you guys, and welcome back to my channel. We are doing another Teaching in Your 20s podcast episode. You guys know the drill. If you are not already following the podcast, check out the link in the description. It will take you to Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you prefer to listen to your podcast. I will also link up here some of the previous podcast episodes that I have done. If you are a first-year teacher, a new teacher, a teacher who is just struggling, this podcast is for you. Let's go ahead and just get straight into it. Today we're going to talk about parent communication. I'm actually very excited for this one. This was one that you guys requested, so let's just go ahead and get straight into it. Gotta put everything on do not disturb. Hello you guys, and welcome back to the Teaching in Your 20s podcast. If you are new here, thank you so much for being here. I want to welcome you guys to the podcast where we talk all about teacher things, teacher anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, handling student behaviors, and just the tips that I have to help make your school year go more smoothly as I have finished my third year of teaching. So I have 3 years of teaching experience. I have taught kindergarten and I have taught fourth grade and nothing in between, but I do feel like I want to help you guys out in just prioritizing your mental health, protecting your peace, and all of the teacher things, and just helping our lives feel more balanced and less chaotic. That is the vibe. So if you are new here, make sure that you check out all of the episodes that you have missed. I recently did a Calm Classroom series, which really focused on that protecting your peace part going into a new school year. And today I want to specifically talk about parent communication. This is something that actually was requested on the podcast, actually through one of my Instagram DMs. And so if you do not follow the podcast on Instagram, it is just Teaching in Your 20s. Make sure you get on that because I do post a lot on there and just extra fun tips and more graphics for the podcast and things like that can be found on there. And I would love to have you guys there because I do love hearing from you and what you want to hear on the podcast. That's super important to me. I want to make sure that I am producing podcast episodes that you want to listen to, advice that you feel like you need. And so one of those things was, how do you communicate with parents when you are so young and the parents are so much older than you? They're asking you for parenting advice sometimes, how to help their child academically, socially. I think the hardest part with that piece of parent communication when you feel so young is when parents ask you how to help with behaviors at home that you are also seeing in the classroom, because it can feel so much like, well, I'm 22 years old. I do not have a child on my own. I don't really know how to help you. And so in this episode, I want to give you guys tips as to how to feel more confident when having difficult conversations with parents about student behavior or student academics. It is something that you are new at as a new teacher, and it is honestly, one of the hardest things about being a teacher in general is the parent communication aspect of it, because I'm sure you know that it can be really hard year to year with different parents that you are dealing with. Sometimes they are lovely and wonderful, and other times you are just having to take deep breaths before communicating with them. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this episode and give you guys some actual things that you can do that are going to help you when communicating with parents. The reason that I say that parent communication is one of the hardest aspects of teaching is not just because it's my experience, but because in the research that I have done, it is one of the toughest things that first-year teachers face. And when I say research, I mean articles, comments on my own videos, talking to people in my own life who are teachers. That is one of the most challenging things of being a teacher. It can be hard to put in a professional way how a student is performing academically, and especially when it comes to behaviors. Student behavior is very sensitive and is a hard topic to discuss with parents, because you are essentially talking about the way their student behaves in class, which a lot of the times, I would say most of the times, has to do with how they behave at home and how they are being raised. And so there is just a very fine line between I'm telling you what's happening in the classroom, and sometimes parents can take it as you trying to speak negatively about their parenting habits. And I especially think that when it comes to parent-teacher conferences, this is where you can really see where student behavior might be stemming from. I think that this is something I've talked about with my teacher friends. It's like when you have parent-teacher conferences, you're like, oh, everything is adding up. Everything is making sense as to why blah, blah, blah behavior is happening in my class, or why said student is performing well academically, or why they might not be performing well academically. Once you see the personalities of the parents, it is easy to kind of see how the student is and why the student is that way. In my experience, the hardest thing for parent communication my first year of teaching was definitely the imposter syndrome. I felt so much like I am brand new at this. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel qualified giving you as the parent advice on your student's behavior. And to that, I will say, yes, it is true. You are new to this. This is a completely new career that you're having. It is your first year, and I think it's completely normal to feel that way. And it's one of those things that you just have to practice. You have to practice the way you say things to parents. And a couple tips that I want to get into right off the bat are listening to other teachers do this. So when I say that, I mean ask a partner teacher, ask another teacher in your grade level if you can sit in on their parent-teacher conference. Even though you are not a part of the parent conference, it can be so helpful to just see how a veteran teacher responds and reacts to parents. And this was something that I loved about having a partner teacher when I taught fourth grade, because we actually, the first semester, did our parent-teacher conferences together. And my partner teacher had been teaching for like over 10 years. And so she kind of took the lead, and I could hear the way that she said things, the way that she framed things. And it's very similar to needing to watch a teacher teach in order to understand their teacher talk. And that's something that comes with a lot of experience, where you just know how to react to things and how to say things in a way that sounds professional and sounds better than what you might be able to produce on your own, because you just don't know it yet. So I highly, highly recommend that you go and try to sit in on at least 2 or 3 parent-teacher conferences if somebody is comfortable with that. If you have the time in your schedule to do that, I would say make the time in your schedule to do that. And it doesn't have to be during parent conference night. Like if you know that this is something that you want more experience on, even you can talk to your admin and say, hey, I would love to sit in on any conversations that teachers are having with parents, because I feel very lost with this and I just want to watch how it's done, take some notes, reflect before conducting my own parent-teacher conferences. I know, at least for me, my first real experience with parent-teacher conferences was my first year of teaching. Because my internship happened during COVID, I was just not present for any of the parent-teacher conferences. They really tried to limit any of the people that were in that meeting. And so my first time doing it was when I was a first-year teacher. So kind of jumping off of watching somebody else do the conferences, the next thing I would say is to make sure that you are fully prepared for the parent conferences. And I guess right now, this portion of the podcast, we're really talking about parent-teacher conferences, because I think that's one of the first things that you are experiencing, especially at the very beginning of the year. I mean, you're having Meet the Teacher, and then in September, like a month into the school year, you are having those tough conversations with parents about their students' academic progress, social progress, all of those good things. It happens very quickly your first year. So I want to just, stick to the parent-teacher conferences right now, and then I'll give overall, like throughout the year, tips later on. So going back to the focus of parent-teacher conferences, I really recommend that you prepare for your conferences and give yourself a little bit of extra time when you schedule them out, because it's just inevitable that your conversations with parents are going to go a lot longer. And also make sure that you're giving parents the option to just have a phone call with you, because that can really shorten your load of conferences that you need to get done in one night. And also, please do not stress if you feel like you cannot fit every single conference into one night. Just meet with the parent later on in the week. There's nothing that says that you cannot do that. I mean, definitely talk to your admin and say, hey, I really want to take the time to talk to these parents. I think these need to be longer conversations than a 20-minute period per se. and just tell them I'm planning to schedule these conferences later. And so this actually just made me think of the fact that my friend who is a teacher, she recently was sick and she could not attend parent-teacher conference night. And I feel like as a first-year teacher, I would have completely freaked out about that. And I think she probably would have too. It's her second year teaching now. But instead, she was just like, oh, it's fine. I will get these conferences done throughout the week. Like, it is okay. It's those things that feel like they're the end of the world if you don't make it to parent-teacher conferences that really in the end, there is a solution to everything and there is no need to stress about it, especially if you are already sick. I think it is so important to have the evidence to show the parents. And your school is going to give you a parent-teacher conference form with things to discuss on it, but just make sure that you are also providing evidence for it. So at the beginning of the year, if there is student work that I want to keep, that I know that I want for parent-teacher conferences, I will make sure to set that to the side. And I feel like this is something that you're not really told or that you don't really remember to do your first year because there are so many things thrown at you, but just make sure that you are keeping some evidence of student performance in worksheets, in tests, and quizzes so that you can show the parents what you are doing during the day, what the expectations are in class, and you have a physical example of it to give to them during the conference. So make sure that you are thinking about that at the beginning of the school year so that you are not feeling overwhelmed during parent-teacher conferences and feeling like you have no data and no evidence to show to the parents. So the way that I would do this is I had a student data binder and I had all my students' names and information in there. So I had the important information that parents filled out at the beginning of the year. And then I also would put aside the things like while I was grading, I would put aside things that I wanted to show to parents, especially if it had to do with a behavior too, like if the paper was crumpled up, if the student had scribbled all over the paper instead of doing their work, I would save those things to show the parent, like, here, this is what I saw in class, this is what your student turned in, and just so that the parent can see exactly what you are experiencing, because a lot of times students are behaving very, very differently at school than they are at home. I mean, there definitely is a lot of times when students are behaving pretty consistently at home and at school, but something that I found common would be having conversations with parents, and they would say, oh, well, my student is like never has an issue doing that. They're never defiant at home. And it's just that the school environment is so different. You're having to kind of make them do things that they might not want to do. And so, of course, there's going to be a different reaction to that than if at home they're all on their own. They don't need to share anything. They have options for the things that they want to do. And so having that physical evidence really just helps to kind of back up what you're saying. You need evidence. You can't just say things. You need that proof in order for parents to start to get on board and start to understand what is going on in your classroom. Along with this, I think, again, at the beginning of the year, it is super important to start documenting student behavior as soon as it happens. And the way that I did this is I had basically a running record of student behavior separate from their academic progress, because obviously we are already doing that. I think it is equally as important to do this for student behavior. And so creating at the very beginning of the year an Excel spreadsheet, and it can literally just have the student names. You can have on the top like the behavior, the consequence for the behavior in class, the time it happened, where you were, what you think caused the behavior to happen, and then how you communicated with the parent, and adding the date and adding all that information there as soon as it happens will be really helpful in just having, again, evidence to show parents what is going on in the classroom, and even for you to start to notice patterns, to start to see, okay, well, maybe this is why this student felt that way. I'm going to move them to go sit somewhere else. It's just something super helpful to have and to look back on, especially when you're talking to admin. If admin does need to get involved in any student behavior or any parent-teacher conference, if you have that documentation that you can show to admin, then it is just going to make the process so much smoother, and you are going to feel so much more confident going into these meetings because you know what is happening in your classroom and you have proof of exactly what is going on. And so I really recommend at the beginning of the year documenting all those things. And it does not just go for the negatives. I think something really important with parent communication is making sure that you are sending home positives as well. You do not want the only form of communication between you and a parent to be about negative things. You want to to build a good relationship with the parent. And so it's so important to share those little wins with the parents. And something that I did in kindergarten that was really easy for me is I had a student of the day, and it was a secret student of the day. And at the end of the day, the student got like a little card saying that they had followed all the rules, they had done excellent in their reading work for the day, and it was just a quick thing to send home to parents. And I purposely would make sure that I was sending those home to the students that I frequently had to communicate more negative things to the parents. I think it just really helps with that relationship with the parent in changing their mindset from, oh, the teacher is always messaging me when something bad is happening and they never are telling me anything good that's happening in the classroom. I think just sending in that positivity is so important, and it goes so far with the relationship that you will have with the parent. My next tip for parent conferences is to make sure that you are not taking things super personally. You might feel sometimes, depending on situations that you are in, that parents are attacking you in a way and that they are criticizing things that you are doing. And I just want you to remember that that parent, their student, is like their entire world, and they want what is best for their student. And so it makes sense that they're coming into situations emotionally. And also, you just simply cannot control how somebody is going to react to a situation. And I feel like this just goes for life in general. It's just you cannot control how a person is reacting to things. And so making sure that you are kind of taking a step back and you are assessing the situation as a whole and trying not to take things personally is just going to help you, especially when it comes to your mental health, and just trying to create that boundary with work and life, and making sure that your work, your schoolwork is not seeping into your life. Making sure that you have a boundary with yourself where you are not allowing other people's negativity or other people's negative comments to affect you in your personal life. So when it comes to these parent-teacher conferences, that is also so important to remember. You have to be so strong and just so resilient during parent-teacher conferences, because you might have a conference that did not go as well as you wanted to, and then the next second you have another parent that you have to start another conversation with, and you do not want previous conversations to seep into your next conversation with a parent. Every parent is a fresh start, a fresh slate, and really focusing on those things that are going well is going to improve your mental capacity to handle things with positivity and professionalism, especially when it just comes to things that are so out of your control a lot of the time. Just be confident in the fact that you are prepared for those meetings, you know what you're talking about, you have the evidence. And this leads me into my next tip, which is to say when you don't know the answer. Be honest with parents. So if a parent is asking you for advice on how to parent their child, my best advice is going to be that just remember that your job there is really to help them academically and socially, and it reaches a limit. And so if you feel like a parent is asking you things that you just don't know the answer to, and you are not specialized in child psychology or anything like that, I would refer them to the school psychologist or the school counselor and say, if this is something you are really concerned about, I would love to get you in contact with, insert the name of your school psychologist or your school behavior therapist. And also let that person know, like the school psychologist, hey, I had this meeting with a parent. I would love to share your details with them. Do you think this is the right match? If not, what strategies do you think I could give to them to help them at home with their child? You do not need to know the answer to everything. And if you are trying to make up answers to things, it is going to sound like you have no idea what you're doing. And I just want to make sure that you know that it is okay to not know the answer. What is not okay is to lie or try to come up with something to sound good or sound like you know what you're doing. It is so much better to just refer them to the person that you know is specialized in it. Or if you don't know who you should ask this question to, it is so okay to say, do you know what? That is a great question. I do not know the answer to that question right now, but I will be sure to investigate that and figure out what our next steps need to be, and I will get back to you within a week. That is just so much better than trying to make up an answer to something that you don't know. And especially it's your first year at this school, or if you have just changed schools, the parents might be asking you simple things like, oh, do you know the procedures for this upcoming event that is happening? And although you'd love to say that you do, you simply don't know. And so it's okay to say, oh, I don't know, but this person is in charge and I would love to put you in contact with them. The other thing that I want to say with this is it's great to put them in contact with people, but don't try to do the other person's job and don't try to be the liaison between the parent and the person that they really need to talk to. So kind of going back to that example with the school psychologist, once you know that the school psychologist is the right person and is the person that's going to handle it, you need to remove yourself as much as you can from that communication. And instead of saying to the parent, oh, this is what the school psychologist said, give them the school psychologist's information and remove yourself from that communication. Obviously, you're going to be involved in some sense of observations of this student, data from this student. But when it comes to being a person of contact and communication, you don't want to be stuck in the middle of that communication pattern and have the parent asking you questions that then you need to ask to the psychologist. Just put them in contact with that person and remove yourself in the meantime while they figure out what the next steps are. And then it's most likely that you're going to have to jump into meetings and things like that. But just make sure that it's set that, okay, now you need to communicate with this person and I am no longer the person that you are communicating with on this. Obviously, I am your child's teacher, but at this point, it seems like we need to take it a step further. So you're going to be communicating with the school psychologist right now. And that's really going to help you just to set those rules and set those expectations for the parent. Now, I'd like to move on from parent-teacher conferences. If you guys do think of questions that you have about parent-teacher conferences that I did not cover now, or anything about that type of communication when you're in a parent-teacher conference, make sure to leave a comment so that I can get to that and I can answer those questions. But now I'd like to talk about just parent communication overall and the consistency of it throughout the school year, the methods that you're using to communicate with parents, and how you are having those tough conversations with parents that are inevitably going to occur. I do not think it's realistic to think that you're going to go through an entire school year and never have a tough conversation with parents. That is a skill that you are going to learn how to do over the years, and it is something that is constantly going to happen, and that is okay. It is all about problem solving and making sure that you feel like you are on the same team as the parent and the parent equally feels that way. The first tip that I want to talk about super briefly are boundaries. I did an entire episode on this in the Calm Classroom series, so if you have not listened to it, make sure you listen to that. But I just want to quickly touch on boundaries with communicating with parents. You might want to be responding to parent emails late at night, early in the morning, but just know that it can wait and that the parents are going to be respectful of the time that you set, and especially the tone that you set at the beginning of the school year of that 24-hour period. I will respond within 24 hours and I will be responding during contract time. But really, to get into the email communication and messaging communication that we have nowadays and tapping into that imposter syndrome. So a lot of the ways that we communicate with parents nowadays are through apps, whether it's Class Dojo, Remind 101. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones out there, but those are the two that I have used, or if you are emailing with a parent. The imposter syndrome comes in when you feel like you are not qualified to handle the situation that you're in, or you feel doubtful about what you're saying. To that, I would say I have a couple of tips in regards to overcoming the self-doubt and overcoming the imposter syndrome. One of the biggest tips that I have is to, especially at the beginning of the year, if you do get a message that you are really unsure how to respond, or you really don't know the best way to go about approaching this parent, ask for help. This is going to be my biggest tip, my biggest piece of advice, because you are going to come across situations that you don't know what to do, and that is completely fine. The biggest thing is that you need to ask for help. It is so okay to be quote unquote bothering admin or bothering, I don't know, a teacher next door. But once you figure out the people who are willing to help you, I really think that it is so important to ask for that help so that you are not feeling like you are sending the wrong message to the parent. And with this comes practice as well. So once you start getting advice from other people, you have to take control of your situations, and you know your students best. You know what's going on in your classroom best. And like I said, we talked about making sure you have that evidence of student behavior, evidence of academic progress. Those are the things you need to be using when you are talking to parents. And if you are getting an email, a message, a phone call from a parent that is just nasty and rude, because trust me, it does happen, take your time before you respond. Sit with it. Do not respond immediately, because you might regret what you say. Make sure that you are responding with professionalism and not emotion. Do not let emotions get the best of you. Do not get in a headspace where you are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they spoke to me that way. It also is so hard to understand somebody's tone over text message when you don't know them. And so a lot of times things I would say, if I got a message that I felt was very heated from a parent, I would say, I hear you. I would love to set up a phone conversation with you about this. Are you available for a quick 5 to 10 minute phone call? And I found 90% of the time that this was a quicker and easier way to resolve the problem, rather than sending back a text that is very strict and stern from your end. It is so much easier to communicate with parents over the phone. And I found that when I saw a message that I thought was kind of rude, and when I got with the parent on the phone, their tone was completely different. And so I was misreading their messages, or maybe they just are nicer on the phone and they realize, oh, I probably shouldn't have said it that way. There is an explanation for everything that's going on. And so I really recommend that you have those conversations when you can. And I know that you are probably thinking, how do I have time to have these phone conversations? How am I going to have enough time to have these phone calls when I need to be grading papers or I need to be doing this? I think you need to put in the work at the beginning of the school year so that you don't get to a point where you're constantly having to have phone calls with parents and feeling really overwhelmed. I think it's part of nipping it in the bud is when you are upfront and communicating well with parents and getting on those phone calls with them at the beginning of the school year. I find that you're not going to have as many issues at the end of the year. And this is not always true because students are going through changes. There's a lot of things happening outside the school day in our students' lives. And so I'm not saying 100% that this will work, but I do think that especially in situations where you feel like a parent is angry, get on the phone with them because it's a better way to communicate than sending a message back to the parent. The last tip that I have, especially with dealing with situations that are more difficult, especially if you've had several conversations with this parent and you feel like you are getting nowhere, I would recommend having a meeting where somebody else is sitting in on this conversation. If you feel like this situation is getting out of control, you're feeling really anxious about it, have somebody else sit in on the meeting with you to help you and to provide support for you. A lot of the times, your admin team will be happy to find somebody to help you to navigate this relationship with the parent. And a lot of times when it is getting to that point, the parent wants to speak with admin anyways. And so it's just really helpful to get ahead of it, especially if you're having a conversation with a parent that is super tough. And if you do have a partner teacher, have that partner teacher come sit in on this conversation. Let the parent know that the teacher is there. Say, hey, I just wanted blah, blah, blah to jump in to kind of hear what we're talking about and to help us to come to an agreement and provide some strategies to help us in moving forward. I think a lot of the times the things I would say during tough conversations would be to pull it back to, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let's figure out how we are going to move forward, because that is the goal in the end, is to help their student move forward, to help the situation move forward and come to a resolution. And so if you feel like the conversation is just spiraling and you are like, I don't know how to get out of where we are right now, I want to move forward, just say, I hear what you're saying and I truly understand the challenges that you are having and that your child is facing in the classroom. Let's talk about next steps, how we can move forward. And back to having another person in the room with you. If anything crazy happens, I'm not saying that it will, but if it comes to a point where a parent is saying and going to admin and complaining about something that you said or something that you did, it's really nice to just have another teacher to back you up and say, hey, I actually was in on that meeting and that did not happen the way that the parent is portraying it. And so just keep in mind that you always can ask other people for help and ask someone to sit in on a meeting with you, especially people who are on the admin team or just staff, people who are not teachers. Like I remember I had our reading coach in on a meeting before. I've had our IEP team on meetings before, just to help me with conversations that were difficult. And the more you do it, the easier it is going to get. By implementing all of these tips that I have talked about, it is going to help you to feel less stressed, feel more prepared for conversations with parents, and feel like you have a hold on what to expect when it comes to parent communication and how you should be communicating with parents. There is not going to be a 100% foolproof way to communicate with parents, but by implementing these tips like documenting everything, making sure you are staying organized, making sure you are prepared, going over things and getting advice from other teachers, it is going to help you feel so much better. And again, this is one of the skills. Communicating with parents is one of those skills that you are going to develop and you are going to get better at as the year goes on. It is something that you have to practice, and sometimes the conversations aren't going to go well. And instead of focusing on why it didn't go well or the specific thing you said that went poorly, focus on, okay, how can I do this better? What can I say next time that will resonate with the parent better? What can I do next time? What can I show them so that these conversations go better and so that I am not as stressed out about going into a meeting where I feel like I am not prepared. I really think that the imposter syndrome that comes along with it will start to go away as you practice, and you just have to push through that feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing. I was recently listening to a podcast of Mel Robbins, and I really liked how she said, instead of fake it till you make it, because that's a thing that I would say a lot, like, oh, you just have to fake it till you make it. She said, make it until you make it, because we're not trying to fake things, which goes back to when I said don't tell parents an answer that you think they want to hear or try to come up with something because it's going to make it worse in the end. You're not faking it. You're trying, you're attempting, you're making it until you make it. And so that's just a little snippet from her podcast that I wanted to mention to you guys because I really liked it and I really think that it can apply to teaching as well, especially when having those tough conversations with parents. Keep trying until you make it, until you feel like you are more confident. And I promise you, by the end of the school year, you are going to feel so much better and so much more prepared going into the next school year than you were going into your first year of teaching. Everything comes with practice, pushing through those feelings of self-doubt, and reminding yourself that you are well prepared for this, that you do know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about because you have spent the most time with your students. And in the end, you are a team with the parent. That is something that I would even say during meetings. I would say, we are a team. We are both here to help blah, blah, blah student increase their performance, increase their success, have a better time in the classroom. And so let's work together. That is the mentality when you are talking to parents. They are part of this team. And research has shown that parent involvement in school is so important for student success. And so having healthy, frequent communication with parents is so important. And just know that you will be able to get through those tough conversations. They are going to be hard, but you are going to get through them. I really hope that you are able to take something away from this podcast. And I would love to know which of these tips really resonated with you. So please make sure to leave it in the comment. If you know somebody who is also a first-year teacher and struggling with parent communication, just needs to hear that they can do it and that there are actual tips that are going to help them to feel more successful, make sure to share this podcast episode with them. I'm sure that they will thank you for it in the end. And if you are a new listener, thank you so much for being here. I really love this community that we are building of teachers who are trying their best and sometimes failing, sometimes needing a little pick-me-up, and sometimes just wanting to hear advice from somebody who has been there, who has done that, and that is exactly why this podcast is here. And with that, I hope that everybody is having a wonderful school year. I'm wishing you all the positivity. Really focus on those positive things that are going on throughout the day, because I know how hard teaching can be, and I want you guys to focus on the positives, the small wins, all of those good things, because it really is such a rewarding profession, and you are making such a difference in these students' lives. And on that note, I will talk to you guys in next week's episode of the Teaching in Your 20s podcast.